Hi everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash, and thank you so much for joining me here once more. If you're new to the channel, thanks again so much for being an amazing part of my life. And obviously, those who've been watching for a while, appreciate you too. Let's take a quick look here at some important stuff. We're going to dive right in, kind of give you just kind of an overview that we do have money flowing in to basically fiat-backed stablecoin. It's a very good sign. We haven't seen this in a while. This is very common or typical near the end of the year or beginning of next. So as we start to see money flowing in, there's a good chance we will see a push in either direction. Obviously, don't forget to like the videos, comment below. Really appreciate you doing that. And taking a quick look here at the order blocks, we just want to kind of zoom out a little bit. We can see 91,300 is about 100 million in positions there available to be sold. So keep in mind that 91.5 level, there's a lot of liquidation there. That's good, a good chunk there. Also, we got some pretty big order blocks at 81,000, 82,000. I think that's pretty low likelihood. Keep in mind, these aren't necessarily incentivizing scenarios. They're more so what's going to happen when we get there. So we'll probably see some selling pressure at 91.5K as we identified yesterday if we hit that. Good news is Ethereum dominance is starting to increase and altcoin dominance basically is plateauing here for the last 3 or 4 days. So basically money's flowing into ETH and typically, altcoins will follow. So we'll be interested to see what happens with that, but I wouldn't expect a whole heck of a lot. Today's the end of the year. Generally speaking, prices are usually pretty well suppressed within the last week or two worth of trading. As we can see, there's a lot of low volume too overall just in the last 24 to 48 hours. Taking a look here though, liquidation last 24 hours, a lot to the downside. Once more, that $87,000 to potentially 86K range, likely the next target area for us. Okay, so just be mindful that could be the next target. And taking a quick look here at the overall scenario for the last 7 days. Once more, I've been talking about this for quite a few days now. 86,000 is that large chunk of liquidation to the downside. It's slightly larger than the upside. So, as time progresses, the liquidation on the upside starts to fill and continue to increase based on shorts coming into the market. So all that being said, largest chunks of liquidation, 86,000 to the downside and roughly 91,000 to the upside. Those are two areas to kind of pay attention to where we're probably going to see a slight reversal when those levels occur. Now, taking a look here, just at the quick crypto market overview, I mean, there's nothing really to note except, once again, ETF net inflow is increasing. That occurred roughly a couple of days ago. So Monday, we saw a pretty significant inflow there. Even though the price action didn't reflect that too much, we did see a short-term pump that inevitably, we basically shorted that top at 90,000. Not really a lot happened with that, but good news is we're starting to see a little bit more inflow. So we'll pay attention to that and see if that ends up being very beneficial for us. All right, folks, jumping right into the back-end data here for Bitcoin, just kind of touching on some important stuff here. I just want to give you some perspective once more. We kind of already highlighted the liquidation ranges, but simple way to understand it from a macro perspective, 84,000 is kind of that larger time frame liquidation on the downside, respectively 86,002 on the 7-day time frame. If we kind of look as well at the open interest ranges, also really simple, easy numbers. 90,000 is that upper range there, and the lower range is roughly 87,000. We're kind of working within a $3,000 range here so far within the last week's worth of trading. So just be mindful until we break that range, it's going to probably continue. That's just generally how range-bound trading works. It's also the year end, so I wouldn't expect a whole heck of a lot today. And we're probably not going to see like a strong shift tomorrow immediately just because it's the first of the year. But generally speaking, profits being taken, year-end stuff's being settled for taxes. There's a lot of reasons why the end of the year is kind of flat. There's also a lot of holidays too. All that being said, liquidation deltas remotely in the green, but that isn't a super amazing or indicative sign. And when we look at liquidation, once more, just kind of reaffirming 86 to 87,000 is that lower range, and roughly 90.5 to 92K is the upper range. All right. So until we get closer to one of those two levels, we can presume that those levels will continue to gravitate towards one another. All that being said, majority of the local fair value gap was filled for the upside. We do have a small one here locally upwards about 88,000 just because the price action pulled back so aggressively here in the last couple of hours. All right, so a little bit of fair value above the price, but generally speaking, not much to really note here on the charts. The daily time frame is going to consistently give us false positives here until we break above or soundly reclaim that $90,000 range or 50 in the RSI. Preferably both. Those are levels I like to look for. Good news is 87,000 is that macro point of control. So if we can continue to maintain above that, build that foundation of volume in that range, and we'll be in pretty good shape. But for right now, it's far too early to tell if we're going to see a breakout or a breakdown, so to speak, once more until this range is broken. So as per usual, range-bound trading is exactly that until it isn't. Okay, so 4-hour time frame. The last thing to kind of just note here is that we're consistently above and below 450 in the RSI on the 4-hour time frame. I don't love that. That doesn't give me a lot of indication that we're going to go up or down here. We are seeing stochastic starting to top out, so it would make sense that we go a little bit further down. I've been, talking to my community for the last 3 or 4 days now about taking a long at the 86,000 once that level's been swept. Now, there's a good chance that that may not even be the bottom, but there's a chunk of liquidation there. It's been there for a while, so I'm very, very interested in a long in this range here, just based on natural capitulation and just kind of this consistent up and down behavior. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm looking for there. Obviously, if you're part of our community, you'll note that I also have a good handful of trades that we're looking for. If I recall correctly, it is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP. There's some short ranges that we're looking for, but those never happened, right? So we're probably going to be switching that and over the next couple of days looking for some long entries at lower price points. That's kind of the concept there. Either way, if you have any questions on that, or perhaps you want to join us, cryptocash.tech is a site, link down below. We got a lot of new members coming over. Keep in mind, we do have today only for the remainder of that 25 days of Christmas sale. We're basically at the end of the year. So obviously, if you want to take advantage of that, let me know. Friendly reminder to our traders, we got a 15% trading discount using my link below to register for Bitunix. You'll also automatically be eligible for future trading competitions through this exchange. It's an excellent exchange. There is no KYC required. Be sure to use my link down below to register. All right, folks, quick look here at Ethereum. And why don't we just go ahead and double check the side-by-side comparison first, kind of see how it's performing versus Bitcoin. We can see Ethereum is looking quite strong in this current range. Even though Bitcoin continues to pull back, we've seen how big of a correction? It's about almost 2%, just say 1.75% for Bitcoin. We can see that rough estimate of about the same, but it's bouncing back a lot stronger. And it hasn't established a lower low, which Bitcoin has. So when you kind of compare the difference here, this, including the fact that ETH dominance is increasing, there's a stronger chance we see a breakout for Ethereum here soon, especially if Bitcoin starts to bottom out. So I do like what I see here for ETH. Let's double check the back end, make sure we're in good shape there. 2980, that's that current support range we discussed yesterday based on open interest, and secondary to that 2950. So hypothetically, you're going to consider a long. 2980, 2950, those two areas seem to be appropriate considerations, obviously depending on Bitcoin pulling back or not, right? When we take a look here at liquidation delta, we can recognize here that we're at a pretty strong number. That's 3 billion in the green, letting us know that we're 2x of Bitcoin for liquidation to the upside, basically letting us know, or sorry, liquidation to the downside rather, it's basically long liquidation. What that tells us is that further upside is likely because the bulls are in control though. And that's a good sign here. It does show that Ethereum is one of the few outliers here so far today that's performing very well. Now, when it comes to a liquidation standpoint, there's no doubt that 2850 to 2900 is still a heavy level there over the last 7 days worth of trading. We can see there's a ton of liquidation there. So if we end up seeing 2950, a closure below 2950, that would be a good invalidation that maybe considering a long or closing that long would be appropriate, and to wait for that lower level of liquidation to be hit and maybe average in a bit lower. So that's kind of the concept there. When we look at ETH though here, just double check some stuff on the, let's go to the daily time frame first. As we kind of left off yesterday, we are slowly testing the 50 and the 20-day SMA. We're kind of right in this range. So the truth is, until we break free from 2,900 or 3,000, we still have yet to close above or below those levels in the last 7 to 10 days. So for the most part, until those ranges are broken, we're going to presume that we're going to continue to work within this range. So hypothetically, 3,000, short at 3,000 is still in the cards as far as range-bound trading. But if you look here, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've tried to break 3,000 9 times out of the last, 12 or 13 trading days. So that's a pretty solid sign that we're going to inevitably break and push the upside. And that, in combination with how well Ethereum is looking on the lower time frames, leads me to believe that we'll probably see a push towards that 3050, 3100 level. All that being said, though, daily time frame still not fully bullish at all. We're still seeing money flow index above the RSI, which is good, but the RSI still has yet to break 50. So generally speaking, I like to see that. I'd like to see a closure, as I mentioned previously. Above 3,000 is kind of like that firm indication that we're back on track here. But this is a good little progression here, a good retest of 3,000 multiple times. Leads me to believe we're going to go higher. We also see 2950 as that point of control. So we got a good point of control at 2950, ton of volume kind of accumulating there. And we also have open interest so, basically averaging itself there as well. So 2950 appears to be a solid area of confluence there for us. So hypothetically, we do not lose 2950, we close above 2950 today. That would be more so an indication of further upside on the short term for Ethereum. Once more, very short term, I'm not proposing we're going to see 4,000 or anything like that in the relative near future. We really got to close above 3,000, and I think that's going to also require Bitcoin to stay above 90,000 too, if and when that ever happens, right? We're still not there yet. So those are my thoughts on Ethereum. What are yours? Why don't you comment below, help out the algorithm, see what's going on next with the next altcoin. All right, folks, quick look here at Solana and just double checking some important stuff. We see a nice overextension here at the 4-hour time frame, basically pulling back around that 127 and 128 range. As mentioned previously, we got that point of control at 127 and 130 as far as resistance is concerned, and that's basically a good indication here letting us know that that's a pretty strong resistance for us. Let's double check the side-by-side here and just kind of see that Solana is still very much outperforming versus Bitcoin. It's establishing higher highs and higher lows, where Bitcoin is essentially establishing lower highs and lower lows. So that does imply that there's somewhat of an inverse pairing here, than that Solana is more likely to increase versus Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin were to recover, just say recover towards 90,000, there's a solid chance Solana will probably push or punch through that 130 level. Okay, so just some kind of things to think about there. Let's take a look at the back end liquidation and just recognize too 120 is that solid area of support based on that point of control. A lot of open interest there essentially, and the same thing as well above with 128 to 130 with that resistance. So at this point, based on what we see here, there's a solid chance that Solana will pull back closer to 120. Just based on the progression of how how Bitcoin's pulling back for the moment. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still fairly well bullish and more likely to push higher. But once more, until we break that resistance, we got to respect the fact that it's probably going to hold. Okay, that's kind of the concept. Liquidation delta does suggest here that we're seeing a slight shift in momentum. Bulls are slowly taking control, but there's still a lot of liquidation on the downside here. This does concern me. I've talked previously about an interest in a long on Solana around 118 to 122. So if we can see that liquidation level hit there, that would be a solid consideration for a long, just kind of thinking outside of the box here. But when we do look at the macro structure, there's no doubt that this coin is absolutely bearish, still essentially establishing lower lows and lower highs, has yet to break its local range here. So once more, we get 120 is a support, 128, basically 130 is that resistance. Closing above or below those levels will tell us a lot. Until then, we kind of got to treat it like a range-bound scenario, which essentially just means you buy the sell the top and buy the bottom. That's effectively the concept. So a lot of our traders are doing really well with that. Now, take a look here at the overall scenario for the 4-hour time frame. Just to quickly note once more, overextended, pulling back. We're still above 50 in the RSI, but I don't like that we are we moved 36 hours in the same direction without retracement. So that does imply that we have further downside and more likelihood of continuation lower, even though this coin is definitely looking better than Bitcoin. So when I see those things kind of together, it leads me to believe that being patient right now is probably the best strategy, and try not to force a trade considering the fact that, it's the end of the year, we're seeing profits being taken, and a lot of scenarios here where it's just kind of generally low volume too. It's a strange time of a year to trade. So this always happens every year. Don't think this is anything different. Obviously, we've had a really weird year, but for the most part, this is standard trading, folks. So my general recommendation is just kind of hang out on the sidelines, wait to see if we have confirmation above or below specific key levels that we've identified here today, and then just kind of go from there. But for the moment, shorting 130, longing 120, that's effectively the strategy for the moment. It's just based on the way that we are significantly range bound with most altcoins and Bitcoin too. All right, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, quick look here at SUI, kind of seeing what's going on. And I spent a couple days since I looked at this, so let's just go ahead and double check and update the charts. We do have a fair value gap above the price between 146 and 150. So there's potential reality to see that get hit here soon. But I think soon is probably a poor statement there. It's probably going to be hit at some point. I don't think soon is appropriate. And the reason why I mention that is because we're right below our point of control, 144. Bitcoin's kind of on the struggle bus. And we look at the side-by-side here with SUI, it's performing pretty poor right, versus Bitcoin, or basically the same in a lot of ways if you look at this pattern here. Roughly very similar price action. So that doesn't give me a lot of confidence to want to take a position with this coin, at least to the upside. And honestly, I don't like shorting SUI. I've had pretty bad luck with it, honestly, over the last few years. I'm pretty much almost like a flip of a coin. It's literally 50-50 on a short with this coin. And the main reason why is because it tends to pump and pump hard when it does. So be mindful this coin will probably recover and do very well at some point. But right now, it doesn't look like that is the case with this significant amount of resistance above the price, even though, yes, there's a fair value gap and we're seeing a slight shift in liquidation delta. But as you can see, we're starting to compress with liquidation delta. And usually when you start to see that kind of averaging itself out, it is due for a breakout that kind of suggests like a Bollinger Band type of compression. But it also tells us that you're kind of gambling if you try to take a trade in either direction. Okay, there's no affirmative or kind of confirmation, so to speak, letting us know that we're good to go for a long position. So let's take a look at the daily, just kind of get some perspective here that this short-term descending trend it's tentatively coming to an end, and I'm expanding it a little bit to align it with the 20-day SMA. That's generally the best practice there for trend lines, because oftentimes trends should run consistent with moving averages, kind of giving us the perspective that, hey, over the last 20 days, this trend has established itself as a lower low, lower high pattern, and until we break that trend, there's no reason to presume it's going to change, right? Having said that, we break above that level, maybe even confirm above our 0.618 fib level around 150. That's when I'm going to be a little more confident taking along with this coin. For right now, we're still very premature and early in the phase here. We do see some decent money flow index increasing, basically suggesting that we're seeing more buying pressure in the last 14 days. But that also tells us too that those previous selling candles are falling off, and it's just a natural way to see the price action continue higher, or sorry, the money flow index pursue higher. So it's just kind of a fair warning to those who use Market Cipher for an indicator. It's a good indicator, don't get me wrong, but some people will see that it gives a lot of false positives from what I understand, just based on the simple fact that money flow index is one of the foundational tools that it uses. But needless to say, regardless of that fact, there's nothing here telling us that we're going to see a push to the upside. Most everything's pointing down. So while I don't necessarily love the concept of shorting this coin, you'll probably have a little bit better luck doing so, just based on the premise that Bitcoin is pretty weak right now, likely to pull back to its lower support range of 86,000. So those are just kind of my thoughts there. I hope I'm wrong and SUI explodes and goes straight up for you. But right now at this point, until we get above, just a sound closure of 150 or higher, then we're going to be needing to be patient and wait for that to happen. Okay, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, quick look here at XRP, just double checking some important factors. And I just want to kind of reaffirm something here. XRP is extremely underwhelming as of late, which obviously you could correlate that directly with Bitcoin. So this chart, when you put them side by side, they're both very, very similar as far as just a lack of consistency to the upside, more downside selling pressure. And in fact, if you look at this side by side here, the last 2 or 3 hours, we can see XRP selling off a lot harder than Bitcoin is. So not necessarily the best coin to consider investing in right now at this point. Obviously, average in on spot bag, that may be a different story. But from a liquidation, or sorry, a leverage standpoint, if you're going to be using any kind of leverage trying to take along, you'll probably be in a pretty rough situation there. Now, what's interesting about this is we do see long liquidation delta kind of shifting here. Okay, so we can see it's significantly in the red. When we look at open interest, 185 is kind of that area there, and there's just a ton of liquidation as low as 180. So I would be interested in taking a long on this coin, hypothetically, once that liquidation level has been swept, but this just looks like a really big target there. I think 180 to 184 seems very, very probable for this coin in the short term. All that being said, if that happens, whether or not that happens, most coins right now are fairly well range bound, even though this coin is essentially establishing lower lows and lower highs more consistently. We're seeing that there's a lot of divergence, and there's just not a lot of good indications to recommend taking a long position, right? The only reason to take longs, I would say nowadays, based on how manipulated the market is to find those liquidation levels and to see when they've been hit, and then effectively take a trade in the opposite direction. Okay, because obviously what's happening right now is the market makers, they're pushing the price action down to these lower liquidation levels. And once they've been hit, there's going to be a lot of shorts that are trapped, and they're going to be in positions where they're trying to take late shorts. They're like, okay, cool, we flipped bearish, and then they just jack it right back up again. Okay, so it's standard trading 101. It's happened almost consistently ever since ETF approval. So just be mindful of that. But when we look at the daily time frame, there's no reason to take a long position with this coin. Okay, and I'm strictly mentioning that as a not from a don't invest from a spot bag perspective. This is like your coin is your thing. Do it. That's fine. But if you're trying to take a long with leverage here with 100x, and you're going to try to write it out to $4 because some stupid other person on social media is telling you to buy XRP because it's on a sale, then that's a different story. Okay, that's on you. But as far as the daily time frame is concerned, we're still under all moving averages. This is actually one of the worst charts I've seen. At least I look at pretty much daily. And I can tell you there's nothing here telling us we're going to go up in the immediate future. Okay, 4-hour time frame until we can close back up above, I think, our local high, previous low range of 195, just say $2, then we're really not in a position to expect much else. I'm considering a long on this coin here between 180 and 184, just based on liquidation alone, okay? And that would be considered a high risk trade that I'm gonna watch closely with low position size, right? But once more, this is just the way of things right now, folks. Try to accept that we're kind of in a terrible market until things get better. And at this point right now, we can expect more downside from most coins, just at least in the next 24 hours. All right, those are my thoughts. Sorry they're not quite what you're looking for, but it's just always the honest, straightforward approach for you, okay? I hope you appreciate it. Let me know what you're thinking. We'll see you in the next one. All right, folks, quick look here at Chainlink and just double checking some important stuff. We'll go ahead and extend out our fibs. It's been a couple of days since I looked at this coin here, and just going to highlight some obvious things so you can kind of be mindful of where we're at. First of all, let's go ahead and take a look at the side-by-side comparison. If we look on the right-hand side, we can see Chainlink just chunked down, lost its support of around 1225, 1230. Sorry, that's more like 1235 rather. And Bitcoin is just on the way down. It's doing very, very poor. So the overall circumstance here is that Chainlink is not like outperforming Bitcoin by any stretch. It does look like it's running similar in a lot of ways outside of this very significant tree pattern, but that's pretty much the same for Bitcoin. Anyways, I like to look at the lower time frames, just do a quick comparison of these coins to kind of see roughly where we're at and how they stack up against each other. And I don't see any kind of like extraordinary comparison here. Chainlink looks just as bad as the rest of the market. All that being said, on the right-hand side, we can see from an open interest standpoint, sorry, that's the wrong coin. Chainlink is here. We're looking at 1250 for that open interest area above the price, basically reinforcing that local resistance. So if you're going to insist on a long, 1250 is a good take profit target. In hindsight, that would have been a good area to consider shorting. All that said, when we look at liquidation delta, it's significantly larger now than before. So it lets me know that bears are in control. We have a lot of liquidation on the downside left here too, as low as about 1180. So hypothetically, you're going to consider a long on this coin. Wait for 1180. That may or may not happen, but if that were to, you'll have better luck just based on the simple fact that that area of liquidation would have been swept. Okay, so it's just kind of the standard trading scenarios right now. These white lines on the chart are just key level supports. Previously, we got 1177. That's the local bottom. We do have a lot of liquidation here in this range, so it'd be sensible to presume that that's a good area to consider a long if we come down there, because the price action will probably bounce back up and work within its range that we're in right now. Okay. Other than that, the upper range too, roughly 1280 is that current resistance. We got a fair value gap above us, so there's a solid chance we do see that level potentially next. It's just going to require Bitcoin to remove its head from its ass and stop pulling back and being just kind of a shenanigan monster. And that's just kind of par for the course now, folks. I've mentioned this in every single video today, but I can tell you that the overall circumstance for pretty much all altcoins is just terrible today, mainly based on profit taken for the end of the year, taxes, holiday. There's like just so many compounding factors here, leading me to believe that there's not really a whole heck of a lot of reasons to take a trade on this coin right now, at least until the liquidation level below is swept or the upper resistance range is retested. Those are kind of my thoughts there. Obviously, everyone's thoughts do vary, so comment below. Let me know what you're thinking with Chainlink. Are you trading this coin? Is this your favorite coin, or just, what are your thoughts overall with the market right now? It's kind of really weird. We're in a really weird place right now. Looking forward to a better year next year. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. We'll see you next year. Thanks again so much for your time.